The views expressed on this program are those of the commenters alone. They do not represent the views or opinions of Valley News Live, our parent company, or our advertisers.
Hello and welcome back to 630 Point of View. Now, we always try and air as many of your opinions as possible, and sometimes we just run out of time. And, you know, with as many as we get, we just simply can't air them all. So today, we're actually going to do a couple of segments of your feedback. And before we waste any more time, let's get right into it. The first one says, I'm surprised the federal government hasn't just thrown away the Constitution. They don't seem to care about following it anymore. I just hope that they don't completely destroy it before people finally stand up and say enough is enough. Your thoughts? I'll let you start.
I mean, we talked about Dorner the other day with this whole, the Fifth Amendment about due process, and you've got that guy saying...
They're still denying that they started the fire, despite...
The cops did.
Yeah. And did you see now the autopsy report that shows that Dorner killed himself, self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head, according to the coroner's report?
You don't buy any of this story, do you?
Look, even if they did kill him, even if he did that, if that is him, he was murdered right there on live television.
And do you think he should have had due process? Because it's pretty clear, obviously, he had killed these other people.
Absolutely. I mean, if people like Jeffrey Dahmer are getting due process and you know, Ted Bundy are getting due process and Timothy McVeigh are getting due process, animals, you know.
And what was the deal you were talking about, how the cops were locking down on Twitter accounts that were hashtag Dorner?
They were asking people not to tweet about it.
So there's your First Amendment, freedom of speech.
Yeah, that's, you know, that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's just, it's kind of crazy. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the Constitution does seem to be getting trampled upon these days. I mean, you look at gun rights even. I mean, it's whatever. Anyway, moving on, before we waste any more time, let's get to a voicemail that we received.
My name is Mike, and Betty Grande is from District 41, and you can tell she's from Western North Dakota because she's still one of those people who say, well, North Dakota doesn't have a drug problem. Gosh, and I'm a Republican. I wish she'd wake up.
Your thoughts?
I mean, there's a drug problem anywhere, so I don't know what he's referring to specifically in North Dakota. I've got to presume from living in L.A. and different areas across the country that drugs aren't nearly pervasive here as they are in other areas. So
I've lived in 10 states, and I don't recall one that didn't have a drug problem. I've lived in small towns. I've lived in big cities. That problem is everywhere. And in different parts of the country, it's different drugs. It's kind of interesting. You know, some places it's meth, some places it's marijuana, some places it's cocaine, some places it's all of the above. Bottom line is you've got a problem no matter where you live.
Do you think the war on drugs is effective?
Not as effective as it should be. I think at times it seems to be, but a lot of times, no, it really doesn't. All right, moving on. It says, Mr. Berg, what enemy are you fighting? The Cold War with the USSR is over, and a bigger military does little to stop terrorists. Even if the U.S. cut its military by 2/3, it still would spend by far and away much more than other nations combined. You're living in the past and have lost sight of the world as it is today. The U.S. has the the two number one air forces in the world. Isn't being just number one good enough? Wake up, Mr. Berg. Wake up. Wake up.
It's Friday. Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. I mean, what enemy am I fighting? Have you seen about these things called jihad? I mean, I don't know. Call me crazy, but apparently they hate Americans and want to kill Americans because we're infidels. So I'm not quite sure what you're getting at, other than I think that you can have peace through power, and you understand what happened with Reagan and Star Wars. We didn't have all of Star Wars set up. That was all a poker play by Reagan.
But I think his point is that when you're talking about jihad, isn't it a stronger intelligence, a better weapon against it rather than a larger military?
Well, it depends, obviously, how you use those resources. I'm not a fan. I'm glad that we're pulling people out of Afghanistan. We don't need a nation build in Afghanistan anymore. And to start to lower the nuclear arms that we have, when you see, obviously, Iran's getting them, Pakistan's got plenty of nuclear heads right now. I just don't know if that's the best decision on our part.
All right, moving on. This is a quick viewer text that says, I had 3 children, and it's time parents start feeding their own children. Well, a lot of parents do the best they can, but there are some parents that just simply can't afford to do that. There are some folks out there going, hey, do I pay the electric bill or do I put food on the table? So there are circumstances where some people just can't do that. Do you agree?
Well, one of the things I think that President Obama said in his State of the Union speech that was good, he said, look, it doesn't make a man by the fact that you can make a child. It's your ability to stand up and father a child that makes a man. And I think, look, you're right. There's a lot of parents that have kids that maybe they didn't think they were going to have, can't support them. Everybody has gone through tough times. At least I have. There's times you just need sort of some help out there and some support. And so I think for people to support those people for a certain period of time isn't a horrible thing. It's when you have these 99-week and 2-year unemployment benefits that you go, something's just not right here. We got to get people back up off the couch and back to work.
All right, we've got another voicemail to play for you.
Representative Johnson has good intentions, but he's just going to wind up causing people who already have many problems to commit suicide. Thank you.
Representative John, your thoughts?
I know he's talking about the welfare drug situation, but
Yep.
people with money problems to commit suicide, not quite sure how he's putting those two together.
I'm not sure either. Let's move on. We'll say, it says, I watched the president's speech last night and thought to myself, what country is he talking about? It seemed like every topic that he brought up was like everything was going just fine and the administration was continuing to keep up the good work, etc. I think President Obama needs a reality check and quit sugarcoating this country's problems and let the Republicans handle the debt problems. He obviously doesn't understand math. You know, and I have gone back and I've watched some of the snippets, and that, you know, to an extent that's true. It just seems like, you know, everything is hunky-dory and let's just move on, rolling along as we are and keep building that, let that debt just keep snowballing, and we'll just keep writing checks that we can't cash, and hey, everything's good.
For any political wonks out there, I challenge you to go back and look at his 2010, 2011, 2012 State of the Union addresses, because they're basically the same thing.
I think he changed the date on it, and that's it.
Seriously, he may have moved some paragraphs around, but that is about it. When you hear this guy talking about, hey, we've got to get rid of these ups and downs in manufacturing and our economy, well then, put forth a budget. It's not that difficult.
To be fair, he's not an awful president, but I think he is, and I don't know if he's intentionally doing it or unintentionally doing it, he is sugarcoating a lot of the problems that this country does have.
And to be fair, in a State of the Union, you should do that. I mean, this is your chance to get sort of that rah-rah speech, get everybody rallied around you and do some good things. And there are some things he's talked about, for example, the college scorecard that I think could be a positive scenario. But you've got to put a budget in place and start getting people back to work.
Yeah. All right, we got one more, and it says, there should be counseling before marriage. Counseling and a waiting period are smart before a divorce. Too many people are too anxious to throw in the towel nowadays. Now, I agree. I like the idea of counseling beforehand, having sessions beforehand, because I think there's a lot of people, especially younger people, that really don't understand what type of commitment you're talking about when you get married. And I think counseling ahead of time, that's an awesome idea, because when you do counseling after the fact, when you start running into trouble, that's, you know, that's like putting a Band-Aid on a major wound or something like that. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't work.
When you look here in the Midwest, people tend to marry at a younger age. I don't know about you, but when I was 22, 23, I didn't know who I was. I still don't at times. I mean, so to go out there and then get married with somebody as you're going through all those changes that you go through from those mid-20s to mid-30s, that's a tough gig in my opinion. I wasn't married back then, but I couldn't imagine all the changes I've gone through and be married to somebody. Some people can pull it off. I don't know if I could have.
All right, we've got more of your feedback coming up later on, and coming up right after the break, Chris had a chance to sit down with Pat Traynor to get a recap on yesterday's Giving Hearts Day, and we'll have that for you coming up right after the break. And as always, it's not too late to join that conversation. There's all the ways you can join it on the screen, and we'll be back right after the break.